You are on the line, Anthony. What would you like to talk about today?
Right.
Hello.
So as you stated, I am a theist, and
Mhm.
I guess when I look at reality, the universe, the earth, and life, I just don't see how living forms could be the result of purely natural forces like gravity, electromagnetism, the atomic forces, all of these things. I don't think that those forces that are the only thing driving matter or putting matter in motion have the capacity to arrange things into living organisms. So my question to you as a theist would be, if you're going to try and convince me I'm wrong, what do you see that convinces you that blind, unguided natural forces can create what we see today as life, unguided?
There's a
So
lot you said
chemistry.
already.
I know I can. Wherever
Yeah,
forest is
the thing
vibrating
is,
right now.
well, the thing
Go
about
ahead, Anthony.
chemistry is it doesn't seem, chemistry doesn't seem to be solving even the simplest problems for the materialist worldview. It seems like chemistry is failing to provide answers in the origin of life and in evolution. And, you can't get evolution without life originating, because life at its simplest form is chemicals. Well, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Anthony, I appreciate it, Anthony. Thank you. Let me just give you exactly what you're looking for. Okay, I'm an atheist. I don't know how life started. So what?
Well, if there's no God, then life would had to have, started by purely natural chemical reactions and things like that. So,
yeah, but I don't know.
Accept that?
But I don't know. But I don't know how life started. Abiogenesis is something that the jury is out on. And the fact that I don't understand how it happened is not evidence for anything other than my own incredulity. So I'm giving you exactly what you want. I'm an atheist. I don't know how life started. So what? That doesn't mean a God did it, does it?
But would you say that as an atheist, you are restricted to believing that life could only have begun by these natural chemical interactions and things like that? There's really nothing else for you?
So we're not incorporating magic. Is what you're saying? Sorry, Dara, I didn't mean to. So is what you're saying that we don't incorporate magic, and you do?
Yeah, it's not magic. Well, intelligence is a magic. So I am an intelligent design proponent, and I don't equate intelligent manipulation.
It's still supernatural. It's still supernatural. Let's make that word if it makes you more comfortable. So we don't incorporate the
supernatural. Yeah, and unembodied mind is the supernatural concept, Anthony. Of course, I agree that minds exist by virtue of the fact that I have my own mind. A mind isn't magic or supernatural, but you're presumably, and I hope I'm not assuming too much here, you believe in an unembodied mind. You believe in a mind that exists beyond space-time, presumably, right? That would be a supernatural proposition.
Well, not necessarily beyond space-time, but certainly I don't believe it's necessarily true that minds can only exist in conjunction with the physical body. I don't think that's been demonstrated either. So,
well, that's the only evidence we have. That's the only evidence. I only have evidence of minds attached to bodies, to brains, if you will. There is no evidence of minds existing beyond that form, to my knowledge. Unless you have some evidence for us that I'm unaware of.
I'll address that, but first let me say the term supernatural to me is completely arbitrary, because if we were to discover disembodied minds by some scientific means or some empirical evidence, then that would fall within the realm of the natural. Natural is just what is encompassed by reality. So
I mean, okay,
sure. I know that's a fair point. Okay, Anthony, that's a fair point, and let me go right ahead and agree with you. So this is why I said at the outset, I don't know. I'm not actually ruling out supernatural possibilities, because as you rightly pointed out, that which is considered supernatural could ultimately be subsumed by our understanding of the natural world. So fine, I'm not offering an explanation. I don't know how life began. Abiogenesis, the jury is out. I don't know. Maybe there is a disembodied mind that started it all. But the time to believe that, Anthony, is when there is evidence for that disembodied mind, not simply because you can't think of a way that it could have happened without a disembodied mind. That's a textbook argument from ignorance fallacy. Translated, Anthony, what you're saying is, I can't think of how this could have happened without a disembodied mind, therefore a disembodied mind is responsible. That is fallacious in the extreme, Anthony. Now, I mean, Shannon, did you want to jump in there before Anthony responds? I think it's important that we give Anthony some time to defend himself here, because I've accused him of fallacious reasoning there. But did you want to add anything before he jumps in?
No, like I see it both from your perspective, and also I'm a pretty strong proponent that not only do we not have an example of a mind without a brain, we have pretty strong evidence based on, what we know about neuroscience and neuronal firing that like there can't be a thought without a certain physiological sequence that has been measured and is required for that thought to take place. And we can measure those, we can see those, we know what they are, we know what they look like, and we know what the outcomes are. And there's no mechanism for interaction that makes an external mind like interact with the brain in a way that makes any sense. Like there's no way for that to occur, or something external to have that sort of physical manipulation of the components of the brain. So I think I would go so far as to say that it is impossible.
Okay, well, I would say the fact that purely chemical interactions have not been demonstrated to result in anything I would consider to be, a primitive life form, that doesn't necessarily prove that a disembodied mind, such as a god, did it, but it leaves open the possibility, and therefore I think that atheism is an intellectually dishonest position to take, because you should classify yourself as an agnostic, because both possibilities remain an option until proven otherwise. And
so, no,
as far
I'm
as
an atheist. Yeah, and you don't get to dictate to me like what I should and shouldn't be, especially without asking me for clarification on why I hold my position. No, because this is kind of annoying, right? So you just told me that I should identify myself in a different way, because based on your understanding of what atheism is and your belief system, that me saying I'm an atheist means that I'm not leaving my options open. It absolutely, I as a human can change my mind in the future. I currently, in this instantiation of myself, believe that it is actively not possible. I am that kind of atheist. I'm not going to speak for any other atheist, but I am not an agnostic. I'm not saying, well, I'm suspending judgment. It could go one way, it could go the other way. I'm saying the preponderance of the evidence is so far in this direction that I can't even see where the other evidence might start that there is a God. I don't think it's feasible, to the point that I think it's just as close to impossible as impossible can get. I've never even heard a definition of God that doesn't have so many internal inconsistencies that it renders itself logically useless, or is so innocuous that it's useless to begin with.
Yeah, so, it kind of sounds like a reversal of the burden of truth.
Absolutely an atheist. And me saying that I'm an atheist does not mean that I'm not leaving my options open. If God showed up in this room and was like, Shannon, what's your problem? You probably wouldn't swear. It's like, if he showed up in this room and said, Shannon, what's your problem? I'm real. And he demonstrated himself in a way that was compelling to me, I could change my mind. But right now, I don't think that that's even within the realm of things that would ever even feasibly happen. So I am an atheist. Well, you don't get to tell me what I call myself. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that, and there are many testimonies of atheists who had supernatural experience in their life and they changed their mind, but it hasn't happened to you, so I understand you not accepting those testimonies.
One minor correction. You have read stories of atheists who have described an experience they've had as supernatural. You cannot say that you have read the stories of atheists who've had supernatural experiences. You're begging the question if you say that. You're assuming your conclusion.
Yeah, okay.
You've read the stories of atheists who have described their experiences as supernatural, right? I know that might seem like a pedantic interruption to some viewers, but I do think it's a crucial one.
Yeah, it's not proof of anything, but it is to those people, and I think that should be seen as significant. But let's go on to something that
it's significant to them, but not necessarily to me, Anthony. I mean, I trust my mother more than almost anybody else on the planet. My fiance, I would include in that as well. They're two of the people I trust most in the world. And yet, if my mother told me tomorrow morning that she had breakfast with Jesus Christ, I wouldn't believe her. I would think that she was telling me the truth. I would think that what she was relaying to me is what she experienced and that she's describing it to the best of her abilities. But I wouldn't, by extension, believe that the risen Christ had breakfast with my mother. You see, they're not necessarily connected.
Let me ask you a question. What if your mother, I'm just saying hypothetically, was a committed atheist, and then she says she has breakfast with Jesus, and then for the rest of her life she starts to go in churches on every Sunday, and the Bible studies, and she's like, well, I saw Jesus, I need to start going to church. Would you take her more seriously if she changed her, if she proved it by everything she did afterwards, suggesting she actually had some sort of experience?
I was already granting
she believes that experience. Yeah.
I mean, I was already granting that by default in my first articulation, Anthony. All it would prove to me is that she sincerely believes what occurred, and she's acting on that belief. Sincere though it is, it's not evidence that the belief is necessarily true. All this serves as evidence for is that she's convinced by it. That's it. I mean, if I told you, and I was sincere in my belief, that I can fly, would you take it any more seriously that I can fly? Or would you just think,
no,
this guy really does believe he can fly? And that's exactly, I appreciate your answer there, Anthony, because that's exactly the position I'm in with regard to those who say that they've had supernatural experiences, those who claim to have seen the risen Jesus or felt the presence of the Lord in their life or whatnot. Just because they are convinced by it doesn't mean that I should be convinced by it, no more than you would be convinced that I can fly just because I'm convinced I can fly.
Okay. I want to.
Does that make sense?
I mean, and again, it does make sense, and I agree. I fully agree that the testimonies of these people isn't proof of anything, but
sure,
it's something we can consider. But I do want to touch on, go back to something Shannon was saying now about, you are an atheist, and that's how you label yourself. Well, let's go to something. MagicSkeptic is that off of something that he said. And he has already stated during the course of this program that he doesn't know how the universe began or what its initial conditions were. He stated that, and I believe this is being honest, that we really don't have a very firm understanding of how life began, to put it mildly. And those are two things that are, typically, in a religious sense, assumed to have been done by God. So the possibility of God is still very much there in regards to those questions. I don't understand why you would commit yourself.
And Anthony, we got to call you on this. Possibility is something that has to be demonstrated. It has to be demonstrated. Would you say that, formally speaking, that there's a possibility that I can fly?
Probably not.
Why not?
Because
something logically impossible
we know about it's just everything we know about humans and how they interact with the forces of nature says they can't fly.
Sure, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. Maybe you just haven't seen it happen yet. There's no logical impossibility in a human taking flight. What you're talking about is an evidential appeal. You're saying that thus far we have not seen any humans fly. Therefore, inductively speaking, I'm happy to conclude that MagicSkeptic can't fly. Right?
Right.
Well, thus far, inductively speaking, I've not seen a god create anything. Nobody has ever shown me a god interact with anything. So why would I assume that God is a candidate explanation for the origin of life? No one's ever shown me one. All I have is people telling me that they felt the presence of an invisible other that they can't demonstrate, that they can't provide anything tangible to show me. And all you've brought to us is that, yeah, but, you know, I mean, to be fair, you have said that it doesn't serve as evidence for anything, but at the same time, there seems to be, at least I'm intuitively sensing something in you where you and your challenge to me about my mother seemed to imply that you would take it more seriously than I would if somebody's life was changed by such an alleged supernatural experience. My point is, I don't know where life came from. I don't know how it got started. I don't know. I don't know why there's something rather than nothing. I have no idea. The jury is out in these questions. And that's it. You're coming to us and saying that atheism is somehow intellectually dishonest because I'm willing to say I don't know, while simultaneously alleging that an unembodied mind did it all, and yet you can't provide any evidence for it. And then you accuse atheists of intellectual dishonesty? Do you see how this kind of seems a bit rich from my perspective, Anthony?
Well, when we go through the candidate possibilities of how the universe started, how life began, it seems like there are two main options here.
I'm going to stop you for a second, Anthony. I'm going to stop you for a second, Anthony, because it is incredibly narrow-minded of you to assume that we have all of the candidate possibilities even available to us to consider right now.
Bingo.
It's absolutely incredibly narrow-minded to assume that that is the case. I would argue that obviously we don't, because if we had all the candidate possibilities in front of us to consider, then we would have landed on one and knew that it was accurate. What's going on right now is that both of us don't know a thing. Both of us don't know how a thing happened. And you're saying the more honest thing to do is to speculate that you do know how that thing happened. And we're saying, no, that is not actually the more honest thing to do. That is not the more intellectual thing to do. And by doing that also, we are going to eliminate the possibility of looking for more candidate explanations. We are going to cut off an avenue to knowledge because we are going to say, I already know. We don't need to find out why because God did it. And then we can just stop. And that is where knowledge goes to die. And I'm not on that team.
And still, Anthony, and perhaps it's because the conversation has wavered back and forth. So, you know, I think it's important that we give you an opportunity here. But you still haven't provided a shred of evidence for the possibility of God as a candidate explanation for starters. But even if we just granted that God is a formal possibility, you still haven't even provided any evidence for that God other than an appeal to an argument from ignorance where you said, well, you can't conceptualize how this could have happened without a God, which is, again, fallacious in the extreme. So, look, Shannon,
your imagination.
I think it's only fair, Shannon, that we give Anthony some time to defend himself here because we've put a lot on the table there, haven't we?
Quickly, though, because we have one last caller that we have to get in before we go, and we've only got a bit of time left. The theists really love us today.
The floor is yours, Anthony. Go for it.
The floor is yours. Go for it.
Yeah. I'll make another comment, and you all feel free to respond if you will, and then you can move on. But to me, it just seems like you were using the term God. I would prefer to use the term intelligence, and it would have necessarily been a form of intelligence we don't understand, disembodied, manipulating matter, which, again, we never really got to that conversation, which I think would have been an interesting one. But
there's always another time. And I also don't care if you call it snoozing, like whatever. That's just a vernacular change. That doesn't matter to me. Call it whatever you want.
God, intelligence, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yes, this intelligence. Intelligence. It's like the. I hate to. I know this has atheist say this argument's been debunked, but the blind watchmaker. You know, when you look at a watch. Or intelligence, natural forces cannot produce these components, these aggregates of matter with these specifically complex parts and systems that would be necessary for life. Intelligence could do something like that. Now, where the intelligence comes from, how it operates, those are obviously questions that would be left to answer, but I just see at the very least it should be seen as a possibility and not this, well, I believe there's no God, even though I've admitted that these things that haven't been proven to be the result of natural processes, still haven't been demonstrated. So maybe that wasn't the most articulate, but I think I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, and I will leave it by saying that I am super comfortable not believing in a God that hasn't been demonstrated. And I don't think that kicking the can down a road because I don't know something by attaching myself to another thing I don't know in order to explain it is the right avenue to travel down or the most honest thing to do. And I would be lying if I did do that because I actively don't believe it. I'm telling you the truth when I say that.
Anthony, have you ever looked at the complexity of a crystallized snowflake?
Yes,
Have you ever seen
I've heard these arguments. Yeah.
Well, sure. I've heard your argument too, Anthony. But we're here having a conversation. Let's have it. I mean,
the way I look at it, the snowflakes would have to arrange them into the shape of a snowman. And
no. Just pause for a moment. The snowflake itself is complex. There is a mirrored pattern, and yet we know that mirrored pattern can emerge through purely natural forces, unguided by an intelligence. So complexity can emerge in the absence of a mind guiding it. Complexity is not how we identify design. Because if that were the case, Anthony, then you can't allow God to take credit for the simple things, can you? Because complexity is the evidence for design. So therefore, simple things can't have been created by God because God creates complex things. That's how we identify design, right? The point is that a snowflake is complex and yet it can emerge without the requirement of a mind being behind it. So the fact that things are complex is frankly irrelevant. How we identify whether or not things are designed is through evidence. A building is complex. This is another example that creationists often use. A building is complex, but the reason we know it's designed is not because because of its complexity. It's because we have evidence of buildings being assembled. We can watch them being assembled. We can study to become a builder and so on, right? The evidence there's an embarrassment of evidence for it. It's not the complexity of the building that leads us to the conclusion that it was designed. It is the evidence that leads us to the conclusion that it was designed. So when you say there's complexity in the universe, I wouldn't deny it, but that doesn't necessarily get us to a God. It doesn't necessarily get us to a designer or an unembodied mind. That's a considerable leap. I mean, the watchmaker argument, using a watch as an analogy for the universe, is obscene in many ways. I think it was Hume who said that it's actually better to conceptualize the universe as a vast floating vegetable. And I think that's much more that much more aligns with my intuitions on the matter. So yeah, complexity isn't going to get you there, Anthony, as far as I can tell. But I'm open to having my mind changed, but I don't know if we're going to have time to do that in this call, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we're going to have to end this call, unfortunately, Anthony, because we have one more caller and we are running out of time. But I think you should for sure call us back at some point in time in the future, and we will explore it more. I appreciate the conversation with you, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all. Have a nice. Yep. You too. Bye.
Thanks, Anthony. Call back.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm sure Anthony is watching live as well. I appreciate the frustration, Anthony. I know you probably had a lot to say in response to what I just said there, and I feel that feeling. I've been in that position before, so I echo Shannon's sentiments.
Call back. Absolutely call back, and we can continue conversation.
Do call back. I'm sure there's a fertile conversation yet to be had there, and thank you very much for calling in.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and the rumors are true. Forrest Valkai is, in fact, a hostage in my basement. If you would like to contribute to his freedom one day, you can do so by supporting us over on Patreon or becoming a channel member. There are specific tiers for specific shows or the channel at large. You can also send us super thanks. Those are great. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Also, fudge the algorithm. Go to one of these things. The algorithm doesn't matter. It thinks it knows you better than we do. Better than you do? I know you better. Hank. There's a bunch of people named Hank. I just freaked way out. Okay, go to one of these.